The secret to acing, tell me about yourself, medical school interview question. Hey, BeMo Nation, welcome to another episode of our One Question podcast. My name is Ronza Nissan, and I am joined here with Meng Yang, a lead admissions expert. Now, we have nothing here to sell you, just pure strategies and tips, so everyone has equal access to education, of course. Now, in case you've never watched one of these or listened to one of these before, they are completely unscripted, so there's no fancy music, no visual, none of that. Just pure content. And this week's topic is the secret to acing. Tell me about yourself, medical school interview questions. So we're going to get ready. I'm going to start the timer here. Okay. All right. Meng, I know you and I both know that this is one common question that you can almost guarantee is going to be asked. And it's one that sometimes a lot of the students underestimate because it just seems very direct and straightforward. You know, what could you really prepare for it? And other times I've seen students kind of panic about this question because, you know, they want to be sincere, but they don't know if they're demonstrating their best self. So what would you say would be the best strategy in navigating this question?
This question, like you said, Ronza, can be perceived as easy, but can be quite difficult because it's so open-ended and everyone usually has more to talk about than they can really give in this answer because you don't want to go on forever. So what you really want to do, well, there's kind of two ways you can go about answering this question. One is you can really give a brief synopsis of your life's journey, highlighting no more than 3 influential events. And I say no more than 3 because, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want your answer to sound like a list of everything you've ever done because the interviewer will come away with absolutely nothing if you do that. It's information overload. So you want to highlight just the 3 most important events in your life and talk the interviewer through why they were important to you, what happened, what you learned from them, how you grew from those experiences, and use those events to highlight who you are as a person. And of course, if it's relevant to the events, you can also include a little bit of application of what you learned from those events to what you're going to be doing in the future. Now, another approach you can take to this question, which has worked better for some students, it depends on who you are, is coming up with the 3 key aspects of yourself that you would want to share with a stranger. That's how I like to kind of coach my students through this is, if you could tell a stranger 3 things about yourself, what would they be? What would be the examples in your life, the activities in your life that demonstrate those 3 traits? And you can start brainstorming about your answer that way and format it in that way, right? So hopefully one of those 2 approaches works for you. One might be easier for you than the other, but it's nice to be able to try both. And I would also say don't limit yourself in preparing for this answer to coming up with just 3 ideas. Yes, in the answer, just include the 3 main things because otherwise there's too much information, but you can actually kind of come up with 4 or 5 different ideas of key components to include in your answer, and then see which ones work better for you. And this question can be asked in a lot of different ways. So sometimes one experience or one trait might be more appropriate for the specific way the question is asked. So giving yourself a little bit of flexibility is a way to not get boxed into an answer and not sound robotic. You can change it up from time to time.
Absolutely. I certainly agree. I think because this can be such a vague question at times, right? And as you mentioned, it can be modified and asked in a different way. You know, they might not directly ask you, tell me about yourself. They might say, similar to your approach, they might say, if a friend was sitting across from us, how would they describe you? So being able to detect the question is very important. But as you mentioned, because there's so much that you could draw from, it could be overwhelming. And as Meng highlighted, the 3-step strategy or however way you kind of navigate that strategy is really going to help you to have talking points, right? Rather than kind of going on in a circle or over talking. And as we mentioned, being concise is certainly the most effective way because, people tend to, lose attention after a certain period. So now, Meg, now that you've tackled the strategies and, the kind of the steps that can guide our students in organizing their response, could you give us some potential talking points or examples of, some things that they, might reference in a response like this?
Well, if I were to answer this question, tell me about yourself. So, of course, I just want to say first off that my talking points will probably be different from yours because you really should be genuine. You should be
Absolutely.
representing yourself. So really, this is just an example. If I were answering this question, I would probably talk about one of the things that I would talk about is my cultural background, because that's a huge part of who I am. I am Chinese Canadian, and so I would probably bring in some of the events in my life where I had to deal with that cultural gap within my family, for example. Interacting with my parents, there's quite a gap in terms of age as well as culture with my parents. And I would use that example to demonstrate how I overcame these kinds of challenges growing up and learned about the importance of embracing not only my own culture, but also the diverse cultures of the people around me. That's one of the things I would highlight about myself. And you can see the ways in which this could apply, this could be interpreted by an interviewer. What I'm trying to highlight here is my cultural sensitivity, and that is something that can be applied if I were to become a future professional in kind of any field, right? This is an important component of most fields now, that you can interact with people who have different perspectives and worldviews, who speak different languages. So that would be something important about myself that I would want to highlight in this answer.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Mang. And I would definitely agree. So we have some time here. So I might try to cover a few talking points here as well for our listeners. Now, essentially for myself, immigration is very big, right? So if I was taking Mang's points and talking up and strategizing for this, I would take a piece of paper and I'd write down immigration and I'd reflect on my immigration. Why was that important for me? What did I learn from that? How did it shape my views on society, on culture? And more importantly, did I refine cultural competence because of that? Awareness, is that something that's impacted how I communicate with people? And I'm saying these things because it certainly has, right? Looking back and reflecting. So I would note down immigration. I talk about cultural competence and awareness, and it's just allowed me to be more open-minded when communicating with people. I'd probably dig in to see if there's a specific example rather to show rather than just tell. Moving onwards, being involved in sports was something that's always been a part of my life, whether I was good or not. I just loved it. I learned a lot about teamwork, discipline, and just patience. Quite honestly, soccer would be an example I would give, and I'll talk about the journey, what I learned as a captain, how that kind of helped shape some of my leadership qualities. Moving on from that, one thing that sticks out is my involvement with nonprofit. It actually stems back to my immigration and coming from, I guess, a country that was afflicted with war. It motivated me and wanted me to pursue these community efforts. So I would talk specifically about an example. One would be War Child Canada, something that was very big, for me, and something I got involved in and I became a catalyst for, and I organized events for. And then I talk about how that taught me a lot about advocacy and taught me a lot about just, again, collaboration and working with different people to bring this information and awareness to the community. So obviously that is kind of mushed in together, but I would find a way to, really define it and refine it, but I'm not in a way where I'm memorizing it. And I think we have a minute here, Mang, to talk about the delivery component. So we know how to strategize now. We have some talking points, some of our examples, of course, to just kind of give you insight, but how can they go about practicing? Is it just, writing it down? Is it talking into a mirror? What would be some of the suggestions here, Mang?
Definitely, I would not write down word for word your answer. You want to, again, give yourself some flexibility. And the way you want to approach this is kind of make an outline for each of the events in your life that are significant that you've identified. You want to have an idea of the specific example that illustrates the point you're trying to make. And then you want to know the application in case you want to talk about it. But then when you actually go about delivering your answer, the best way is to practice in front of someone else who can give you objective feedback. Hopefully this person is someone that you're less familiar with, because you know that during your interview, you're not going to be talking to your family or friends. You're not going to be talking to a parent or brother or sister. So the way you deliver is going to be a little bit different, and you want to simulate that when you are practicing this question.
That's time, Mang. I'm sorry to interrupt. That's our time. We're very strict here. We want to make sure you get all the peer strategies, every bit of our tips and content in 10-minute time frame. So thank you so much for watching or listening. If you like this as much as we like putting this together for you, then go ahead and share it with a friend or subscribe so you don't miss out any future episodes. And do ask any questions that you have in the comment section. Until then, see you later.